Marxism 109, Profit and Exploitation. As we learned in the last video, human labor is bought and sold on the market according to the law of value, and is therefore an expression of commodity fetishism. If labor is sold below its actual value, since price does not correspond to value, then does that mean the root of exploitation is a selling of labor power below its actual value? Marx believed that this was an easy error to make, and it was made by many socialists before and at the time of Marx. Instead, Marx argued that profit and exploitation are rooted in the principle of equivalent exchange, and in particular, the sale of a commodity which we call labor power. Firstly, what is labor power? Labor alone does not possess value. But labor power is the commodification of labor. Recall how the value of any commodity arises. The value of any commodity is found in the labor time required to produce it. The same applies to the commodity of labor power. The value of labor power is found in the amount of labor time required to produce it. In the sense of a human being, this value is found in the amount of labor time required to reproduce himself. That means, however much it costs to keep the laborer in a condition in which he is able to work, and at the same time be able to rise a new generation of laborers. As a result, capitalism requires a class of people who do not own means of production, that is, they do not own the ability to reproduce value with machines or factories, and do not have commodities to sell, except for the commodity of labor power. Therefore, this class sells its labor power in a certain amount of labor time, that is, wages per hour. The lowest requirement for a capitalist wage is that it must be able to enable the worker to remain alive and fit. Does this mean then, that anyone who doesn't have this minimum required wage is not a laborer, or as Marx called them, a proletariat? Not at all. That is the lowest requirement, although Marx, for rhetorical reasons, on some occasions referred to the proletariat as those who own nothing but their labor and nothing to lose but their chains. In Capital he admits that the lot of workers can improve. However, the nature of capitalism tends to be cyclical, as we shall see, and although workers in North America have a good lot now, in time, they will, and by necessity, have to return to that lowest level of wage earning once again. But we shall study that in the future with the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Thus, we can find that proletariat may be afforded many luxuries of the bourgeoisie, that is the property-owning classes. However, so long as they do not own bourgeois property, that is the means of production, they are still the proletariat within the logic of capitalism. So, what have we learned about labor power and its sale? We have learned that so long as the wage earner is receiving a wage which allows for that minimal reproduction of their ability and reproduce, then they are receiving a wage which is not less than its actual value. Therefore, according to Marx, the sale of wage labor is an equivalent one. So, if the purchase of wage labor is equivalent, where do profit and exploitation come from? Well, when constant capital has been developed to a certain level, that is, the technology used in production, then the labor power utilized in production can create exchange values far greater than the value of labor power. Thus, without any technology, the laborer would make exactly the same amount of value as his labor is worth. But with technology of a certain level, the laborer will make more value than his labor is worth, and more than the cost and upkeep of machinery and other costs, so as to afford the capitalist a profit. What does this mean for the laborer? It means that, if the laborer got a say, then as the technology level advances, then his working day would get shorter, so he is once again only creating as much value as his labor is worth. But instead, as it is the employer who chooses the length of the working day is much longer than necessary for the reproduction of labor. That means, the value which the capitalist gets is greater than the value which he gives the laborer in wages. This, in fact, is the use value of labor power to the capitalist. That is, the utility of labor power is in the fact that it is something which can be used to create exchange value greater than its own exchange value. Like any exchange, the laborer parts with his use value, labor power, in exchange for its exchange value, that is the cost of his labor. The difference is, a working day is not defined by the exchange value of labor power, but by the amount of time specified by the employer, and depending on the labor laws in the country in question, that can be anywhere from 8 to 24 hours in a day. Whenever the worker creates value greater than the cost of his labor power, that is surplus labor, and the extra value created is surplus value, Thus, if part of the working day corresponds to the exchange value of the worker's labor power, then the other part is created surplus value which is then acquired by the capitalist. Thus, even though we have equivalent exchange, we still have exploitation. The products of our labor are social products. They represent specific amounts of labored time. The problem is, individual labor is not directly social, like commodities, because an individual's labor power is not exchanged based upon its value in labored time, but upon the wage labor system which values labor only according to the average socially necessary amount of labor required to produce something. Thus, if one spends extra time producing the same commodity, that extra time is wasted, since the value of the worker's labor is only in the average. Thus, although equivalent exchange appears to be equal, it is actually unequal. The condition for this state of affairs is not in ill intent but rather upon the material social conditions, which give rise to the societal conditions of bourgeois society. The solution then would naturally be to figure out the material social conditions necessary to give rise to a more just set of societal conditions, that of communist society. The capitalist maintains his rights by trying to make the working day as long as possible, or getting more value out of less labor, but the laborer attempts to maintain his right as a seller by getting the working day shortened. Here we have right against right, a struggle between collective capital, capitalist class, against collective labor, the working class. Thus the length of the working day is a direct result of the class struggle between bourgeoisie and proletariat, and in the end force decides, either by gunfire or by legislation. But in bourgeois society the bourgeoisie always wins, and the right to profit always maintained. The buying of labor power for a specified time is what obscures the division of the working day into necessary and surplus labor. It may seem like the capitalist provides all the value required for the maintenance of the laborer, but in fact, much of the working day consists of the laborer providing value for his own wage. This is an obscured version of what happened in serfdom, where the serf would clearly work on his own part of the field, and the lord's part of the field. This is a much sneakier way of exploiting the worker, since the work which really does not belong to him is obscured by the homogeneous wage-paid production process. Furthermore, the capitalist's profit only becomes actualized to him when he sells the commodity and puts it into circulation. What are the effects of this process of exploitation on the worker? We shall analyze this next time, when we discuss the alienation of labor.